No? Got some volume?
Yep.
Okay. Hello, hello, hello. Everyone can hear me? Okay, we're going to be talking across borders today. It's the project will concentrate on the Empower Shack in Cape Town. But first, before I begin, I'll tell you that urban designers and architects are facing a crisis. As Godard, the famous filmmaker, says, it's critical to meditate on the point between where you begin a project on an ethical consideration or you begin it on a aesthetic consideration. But actually, the key thing is the two should meet. Ethics and aesthetics have to meet. And that's what makes a good work of architecture, art, film, etc. So we're going to look first at the world, because we are in a new time now. This is the wall between Tijuana and California. And of course, you know all about walls. We got to break down those walls. And in fact, those barriers are becoming now a little bit more transparent. You have the favelas on the right, and you have the World Trade Center. We are living now in the 21st century with 2001, 9/11, in a new era about cities, about society. And if you haven't woken up to that, you will after this talk today. So what we need is not fancy, funny lamps anymore. What we need is light, right? We don't need Hummers, gas-guzzling cars as a design product. We don't necessarily need smart cities. I know this conference is about smart cities, but we don't necessarily need digital and smart cities surveillance and control in every city around the world, because what do they need the surveillance for, right? So what we need is just a kind of less stupid cities, right? We had the welfare state that we all knew about, and governments trying to build a new society post-war, building housing for the poor, but actually that's on fire now. You know the banlieues of Paris. Maybe in your imagination on Berlin or Paris or London, all you guys really know is about 5% of the city. The rest of the periphery of either London, Paris, or is on fire. If not, try and find housing, cheap housing in London. You won't be able to. So the neoliberal city, the proposition of the neoliberal city has been building these kind of corporate cities run by bank officers and investment funds that are basically have no contact with the ground, have no interest in how these cities hit the ground. In fact, they're just speculation, economic and financial speculation. So you ask, technology for whom? Financial models for whom? Governance by whom, right? Who's running these cities? Social diversity, etc. But the one fact we can't negate is we are living in the urban planet. We are all connected now. And in fact, what we do in one part of the world affects another. So this is just a photograph from India, a donation for the poor. I ask you, what have you done for the poor? Because if you haven't realized, the world is 33% poor. And I'm not even going to get into statistics of whether $1 a day or not. But this is the political equator line. It's the line that divides, let's say, industrialized from non-industrialized. And what you have down here is a pixelated map with real GIS points that shows you the growth of the world in the next 30 years. Most of the population growth will be in slums, in case you didn't figure that out. And that's why we're here today, to talk about that. Let's see if we can move on to the next one. So how do you see it? Half the glass half full or half empty? So what we did at Urban Think Tank is begin to go map these things, to start to understand precisely where the poor are living in cities. This is Caracas. 60% of Caraqueños, Caracas population, lives on 40% of the territory, but in high, dense slums that they've built for themselves. And that's, I guess, what the story is about. Here you see Rio de Janeiro. Rio de Janeiro has a very different composition of smaller slums, all embedded in the territory. And here you see Bogota, and Bogota has it all on the periphery, on the fringes. So each city presents a different map of urban poverty. And here you see Buenos Aires, again with embedded slums. And here you see Tijuana, Mexico, and San Diego. And this is probably the biggest conflict point between rich and poor. Or Mexico City, that concentrates the poverty right in the middle. So what we've forgotten as urban designers is the city is about people. So who's your client? Is your client the corporation? Is your client who? No, your client must be the common individual that you're trying to provide services for. Housing, in this case, for the poor. These were my early clients. We started an NGO called Caracas Think Tank before it went global and became Urban Think Tank, now based out of Zurich at the university. But these were our first nannies, gardeners, chauffeurs, helpers in the office who took us into the favelas, who showed us what it was about. Our first experiments were just making basketball tournaments in the open squares. Here, let me take you to someone you know, David Chipperfield. He's built the best museums here in the city of Berlin. Let's see what he thinks about this growing and massive urban poverty. Can you guys switch? Oh, we have no sound, huh? No?
I mean, that's the question that you really have to ask. Are we just decorators now? I mean, is there just a band of sort of architects that go around trying to make everything look good?
Architects have been conventionally and traditionally been handmaidens of the client.
So basically, the point is, architects have been off the client, handmaidens off the client. You don't see any architects fighting for the freedom struggles of India, for instance. And so we ask why, when in the Renaissance, Michelangelo, Alberti, Brunelleschi, all of them were the creators of the Renaissance. Architects were integral. The building of cities, the building of the ideal city was integral to the idea of society. So now I say we have to return to that. We have to reclaim our position, because as David Chipperfield says, are we just decorators, right? So people have a right to housing, a right to resilience, man-made or natural, of course. Democratic cities is what we have to put. Transparent cities. I think that's what these guys are going to talk about now. Safe cities, safe homes. So we need to debunk the myths of marginality. Informal settlements are not the problem. They were the solution, because the city was not prepared for the amount of people flocking to the city. So if you had a bad connotation of what slums were, no, that's first step housing. That's how people have access to cities, right? So we're in the last round, ecology. It's our generation that's going to change it, because in the next 15 years, climate change will be a reality, absolutely irreversible. So we need to work with less resources, scarcity as a design tool. So we also need to think about the perceived city, the conceived city, and the lived city. The differences are the physical space, the mental place, and the social place that we all use. And that's what we began to do at Urban Think Tank. We began to envision a new city for the slums with cable cars, and to make top-down meet bottom-up, because that's not happening. Governments, financial institutions are not working with the bottom up. The bottom has no access to these infrastructures and large-scale urbanization projects, right? And architecture spatializes uneven development. So if you are a pawn for some kind of upscale development in the city that has no component of social elements in it, you are materializing spatial division. Okay? So you are complicit in the process. Architects have been complicit by taking on jobs that they know are not going for social equity, right? So this is our group. We first formed in Caracas. Now we are 25 people working around the world. We wanted to understand why we do architecture, interpret what we do, act where we do, and identify with whom we act. So this is maybe a little film that describes a little bit of what we do. We can put a little volume on that. I'll talk over this. So we at Urban Think Tank praise the productive power and the skills of the inhabitants in the slums, but we are aware of the fact that there is an urgent need for support. Municipal and national governments must provide the financial and technical expertise to make changes on a larger scale, infrastructure and legal framework possible. We are in danger of watching another generation merely survive in cities without any help, rather than flourish in them. The authorities often deliberately ignore potential urban designers, and danger awaits for them people in cities. There are no easy answers in sight. The results of these negligent policies are too frequently catastrophic. What you're seeing here is an autistic children's school, the first autistic children's school ever done in Venezuela. And they told us we couldn't do it on a small site because autistic children cannot rise on stairs. But we made the whole building a ramp. And so the kids go up a ramp and they look at the classrooms and they get aware of nature and the green all around. This is a music school for Parisópolis in Sao Paulo, in the second largest favela. Of course, music being an incredible thing for Brazilians, it made sense to start an orchestra in the favela of Parisópolis. Why? Because when a kid brings home an instrument to the home, he transforms the home environment. So therefore, all of these projects have been started by us, and we found the financing. This is the cable car that first cable car ever used as an urban transport system. It moves people, 1,500 people in 2 directions every hour. And it is now 5 stations connecting the favelas and the hills around Caracas. These are only some projects to introduce to you what you might know in our books, Informal City, a DVD, Caracas, the Informal City, some of our publications. But now today, I'm going to talk to you in the remaining minutes about the idea of open village. We need to create urban villages. We need to introduce the glue of society, which would be medium-scale, low-rise buildings in the cities. So in between all the eastern part of Berlin, all the eastern bloc, let's say, of Berlin, all these Plattenbau, we could add another layer of kind of self-proposed housing. But it's based on Le Corbusier's idea of the Maison Domino, which is an open structure. We saw in Caracas buildings being built with 5 years in between, and you see the top of that balcony now finished 5 years later. So people don't need bank loans. They want to build their house slowly, incrementally over time with 0 bank loans. That's what they want. That's what we did since medieval times. What do you think the whole city, medieval city, how it was built? It was built incrementally over time. But real estate developers now need to make profits in 1 year, 2 year, 3 year profit margins. And that's why they don't build in this component over time. But we have archival photographs of how the hills of Caracas were built. This is Oscar Genaro and his brother banking the site, creating little real estate plots where people would then come and build their houses makeshift. I'm not actually reinforcing squatting or slum building. I'm just telling you a reality that happened. And we want to learn from this process of the open frame, and that gets filled in with the cheapest available materials, right? And here you have Freire Otto, your great German architect who just won the Pritzker Prize. This year, you know, for the Munich Stadium, of course, you know his Freire Otto structures. But here, he's actually creating an open frame structure of a house, and he works with families. This is the final image, and he works with families for everyone to build their apartment as they want. That leads me to the next story, Tower of David, the tallest squat in the world. 45 floors in the air, an office building that lays standing like a dead giant in the city of Caracas. Here you see it in photographs. 3,500 families went into the building over 17 years and squatted the building. So you may think this is a slum. That's terrible. What a tragedy. People squatted in Caracas, in the center, financial center of Caracas, a building. But you guys must know your Hausbesetzers, the stories in German squats, how interesting and how they've evolved in Berlin, right? So from the outside, it looks like a slum. But actually, the framework of the building was the hardware. The software was people adapting that structure over time. And we came in, and over 6 months helping the residents, we actually finished apartments. And what they aspired to is middle-class apartments. The government wasn't giving it to them, so they built it themselves with a little bit of help, with zero financing. So can you imagine what's wrong with social housing? We got a problem. So there's a little short film, 20 minutes, called Torre David. But we worked with the residents with photographs, and we brought it to Venice. We brought it to the Venice Biennale of Architecture. We showed the whole story of the building. We showed them that people were living 1 mile radius around the building. They were living and working in the same area, very sustainable. They were consuming less energy than any other part of the city. And what they needed was an elevator. And Schindler was volunteering to give them the elevator, to work with corporations, to connect bottom up and top down, to put an elevator in the building. The government didn't allow it. So we had this whole idea to convert the building to the first sustainable, self-initiated project in the center of Caracas, but our socialist government was myopic because they're living in dinosaur times. So we went on to create a new idea of a building that could be recreated anywhere in the world, which is the vertical kind of clusters of apartment blocks with a road that goes all the way through the building. Because if you know, you can walk up 4 floors or walk down 4 floors without an elevator. That's legal and allowed in social housing. So this building would connect to other buildings, to hills, and you would be able to create a building that was a continuous street through the building. So this is how design can innovate, making open structures. And here you see that building as it was proposed for Caracas, and the idea that we would connect buildings eventually, and we would raise different levels and have more complex city. So the question is not whether making nice little sustainable buildings is what we should do as architects, put bicycle racks and collect rainwater. No. What's not sustainable is 33% of the world population living in poverty. That's what's not sustainable. So we won a prize for it, the Venice Biennale. Woo! And now, with my remaining minutes, I'm not sure how much I have to go, I'll tell you the story about Africa, which will introduce the topic of this, of working with communities. Africa is long overdue. We should all be investing in Africa. We should all be finding solutions. So we began doing exhibitions on Cape Town. This is downtown Cape Town, CBD. But this is also Cape Town CBD, just outside the CBD. More than 7.5 million people live in 2,700 informal communities. Is anyone telling you that? Mandela did a great job, but we have a problem in Africa, serious problem. Why? Because houses are being burned down. And how did this happen? Well, you can say it was pre-Mandela, right? It was apartheid urbanism, where they planned cities and they put black and colored townships and white townships, and they segregated the city, right? They made these maps that segregated the city, and people were put all around Cape Town. But I tell you today, and if you look at this map, Cape Town is still segregated. Here you see the segregation in the 3 colors between rich, black, and colored. So although democracy was won, there is not a program for decent housing. They can't build housing fast enough. So the Western Cape minister is saying we need a transition model. We need a transition model between informal and formal developing. And that is not the RDP project, which is the one that Mandela promised for everyone. So we've got this situation which is not sustainable, with 2.5 million missing houses gaps. So what do? We find a new solution. It's a second floor. We go to the very townships, we reorganize them here in Kailish and BT settlement. and I will just quickly run through it. We work with local partners, Ikailami, and what we do is blocking out. Blocking out means reorganizing the community, which is like this. We take it, we build a double-story shack, which we already saw. We put solar energy on it. They can open shops on the ground floor. We do microfinancing, and we work with the community to build their houses, to move them and change them. And here, I will end with this little image of how we will move each one together with the community. And I tell you, it's very powerful to work with communities and find these solutions, because you learn a lot as a designer. Thank you.
All right. Awesome, man. That was great. Nice. Blown away, man. Okay. Very nice. Let's start his Cairo one. It is this one here. Good. Test, check. Oh, you can hear me. Fantastic. I'm not sure why the slideshow isn't on the... There we go. Perfect. Okay. Good afternoon, Republica. And I just want to shout out to the Global Innovation Gathering. What's up, guys? Okay, my name is Adam. I'm the co-founder of ICE Cairo. ICE Cairo is part of the ICE Hubs network. We're a global network of technology innovation hubs. We have a strong environmental and social mandate. ICE Cairo started as a result of this. I'm sure you guys remember this. It's the Arab Spring, the Egyptian Revolution. And ICE Cairo was basically born out of a need. Since then, which has only been a few years, we've managed to start 2 more hubs in Egypt. And this is basically what you see when you walk into ICE Cairo. It's a green technology innovation hub. It's a space that's super inspiring, and it's a space that's designed to take sustainability challenges and turn them into sustainable businesses. This is our Fab Lab. We're part of the MIT network. We generally use our Fab Lab for the more low-tech stuff. So this is a good example of a very low-tech device that can be made from scrap material that can purify drinking water. And if you think about how many farming communities all over the world spend most of their money on medical emergencies as a result of waterborne pathogens, you can see that this device, which probably costs about $20 to make, even less, could actually save these farmers a hell of a lot of money they could invest in the education of their kids. So these kind of solutions are absolutely critical when we talk about communities that actually have sustainability challenges they're facing on a daily basis. We also have an online ecosystem. It's because not everyone can make it down to our hub. So we're actually mapping green initiatives all over the country. We're mapping green materials. Where can you go to buy the materials that you need to build the devices that we're creating? We have an e-commerce site we're developing. We have a wiki where people can freely share knowledge of what works for them. And we also have a full e-learning platform to allow young Egyptians and non-Egyptians all over the world to learn how to solve their own sustainability challenges. This is our community. Now, I told you that we have ICE hubs, so that's 4 technology innovation hubs. ICE Cairo alone has about 30,000 youth in our community. Now, you can imagine that within a community that big, the diversity of the expertise within that community can pretty much solve any challenge. And this is really at the heart of what we believe at ICE. We believe that the people sitting here in this room, you guys, together can probably solve any challenge that is put before you. All you need is a space to do it. And for us, places like this, places where different people can come together, are places where the future is being practiced. Society evolved from the 1.0, which is the state, to the 2.0, where civil society was next to the state, to the 2.0 with the private sector and the state, 3.0 with civil society, the private sector and the state, and the 4.0, this is what MIT is talking about these days, is co-creation. And co-creation is the beginning language in innovation hubs. Co-creation is something we practice every day. We even have a non-monetary currency. So a lot of our community, I mean, they're either students or they're recently graduated. Not all of them have money, but they still need to address and access all of this education. And the way that we offer it is this non-monetary currency. You can come and use our space for free, but you need to participate. You need to run an event. You need to help out. There's always a way for you to be involved. This is an example of the kind of device we create. This is a $120 solar water heater. It's made with off-the-shelf parts. Anyone can make it. We freely give the instructions for this to be made. It is now being built by 3 student-led businesses. It is now allowing off-grid communities to have safe access to hot water, which is drastically improving the quality of the health of infants. Now, we talked about this idea of social innovation hubs being a place where people come together. This is a pretty famous picture from the Egyptian revolution. Here you can see Christians protecting Muslims. And this is self-organization. There was no committee responsible for gathering people to teach them to protect each other. This is what happens when the social subconscious of a people is activated. Here you have streets cleaning up the streets of Egypt during the revolution. No one formed any committees telling young Egyptians to go and clean their streets. This is what happens when you activate the latent social subconscious of a people. And this is what we try and practice in ICE hubs. We create the conditions by using things like gamification and community building for people to get together and to self-organize. So, with that, I'm going to hand over to these fantastic people, and we're going to have a fantastic conversation, hopefully, about all of this. Ice, ice, baby. There you go, both. Nicely done.
There are no coincidences in the world.
Let me do a quick poll while he's setting up the PowerPoint. Who in here has heard of Rwanda? Rwanda?
Yeah, exactly.
I got hopefully most of you guys. Who's heard of the Rwandan genocide? Everyone. Now, one of the things you guys might not know is that in the 5 years between 2007 and 2012, Rwanda reduced poverty at a rate of about 12%. That means 1 million people living in poverty in 2007 were no longer living in poverty in 2012. The average real GDP growth rate in Rwanda is about 8% over the last decade. All of this is being driven by the government. And I think one of the unifying topics in this conversation is, Alfredo's really been talking about affordable housing. And I think we're going to be talking a little bit about affordable space. Affordable space for knowledge exchange, affordable space for challenging new ideas, affordable space for innovation, affordable space for education. Sorry? Oh. I don't know.
Sorry?
Is it this? Yeah. Yeah, it's just one side. Cool, so we just put this PowerPoint presentation together like 10 minutes ago, so I've just taken a bunch of pictures from my phone and put them up on the screen to kind of give you guys a little bit of a picture of what this space in Kigali looks like that we're building. But basically what we found was that the government was driving a lot of the innovation and there was no space for people to come together to share ideas. So what we did was we took over a building, actually. In the top left corner, you'll see the building. We started off with about 70 square meters, and over the course of about 2.5 years, our community has occupied the entire building. We're working on, there's kind of a snapshot here of, art events. There's Abdul doing some dance move on the roof. We've got some guys working with Arduinos. We're doing lectures on entrepreneurship, on affordable housing. We're doing workshops. We're doing TEDx events. We're doing all of these things. And the point is really, we're talking about serendipity here. Development isn't something that is necessarily planned. Innovation isn't something planned by definition, really. So we're trying to create space where people can come together, share ideas, and try out new ideas to be able to create something new. And so really for me, this project in Rwanda was about trying to create space for people to come together from the bottom to create new ideas, share ideas, talk about social innovation, talk about business innovation, cultural innovation. And, this really ties into this conversation this morning from Ethan Zuckerman about what kind of, what's the third path? And it's how do we take this online communities that we're all a part of and start offlining them. And so building spaces like this create opportunities for diverse groups of people to come together to share ideas. So, we know that when people come together in social interaction, that we're able to, increase levels of empathy, increase educational outcomes, increase all sorts of social indicators. And so my question, and the topic that I'd really like for everyone to kind of think about here is how can we use sort of laboratories like this, social innovation hubs, to accelerate the rate at which people come into contact with new ideas, new people, and to create cities where we're increasing the level of serendipity. So thank you very much.
Let the guy go there. Hello. First of all, sorry about my English, but if I use my Lusitano language that I like a lot, it will be more poetic, but a poetry without understanding, it's nothing. So, let's go. My name is Ricardo. I'm a project coordinator at Federal University of Pernambuco, and I just present 2 projects we've been developing now that has a lot to do what Alfredo has told to us. The first of this project is called the Parque Capibaribe. Capibaribe is the name of this river that crosses the city of Recife, that is in the northeast of the country, where there's too much loud music and felicity and colors. And the end of this project is to get the river that crosses everywhere in the city and make us park around it. That is a 40 kilometers park it's a project for 37 years. And we are now in the 4th year. We have finished the urban planning of this project, but now we are starting the next phase, that is the monitoring of the implementation of the structures. The aim of the project is to take from 1.2 square meter of trees per habitant to go to 20 square meters of trees to habitants. And what is most special is that we are doing a lot of workshops with the community, so we can see what is better into their communities, how will be the furniture. So you have like this furniture make with this fisherman guy that we're doing coaches. We have swimming pool inside the rivers. We have some boats. We have some children playing around. We have some events to do these workshops to get what are the best solution for this park and for the city of Recife. Oops. So here's to invite you to come to Recife and meet the project, and we could have a good swing. The second project we're involved in partnership with the Ministry of Culture of Brazil. It's called the Auto Labs. Lab Cells. The Lab Cells project is happening in 10 cultural centers that were built in the last 5 years in the country by the Ministry of Culture. And the spaces are like this is a big 3,000 square meter or 7,000 square meter. It has swimming pool, sports center, social assistance, library, and has a public telecenter. But people just go and access internet to keep it posting things on Facebook. It's nothing. So we open a public call so people can go inside these telecenters and transform it into maker labs. So now we are having 15 ongoing what we call occupations. It's not a good name in English, but in Portuguese it's much better. And during this occupation, people are doing instruments, Arduino stuff. The aim of the project is so the community can develop devices to cartograph their cities and to make their cities better. So we have a radio production. One of the products that came from these occupations is this sensible trash can. When you pass around, it opens and plays a small piece of frevo. If someone here has been a carnival in Brazil, probably know what is frevo. And when you throw the rubbish away, it keeps this music going. So in a way, we are doing this research, and the first thing we saw is when you put this thing ongoing, you can have like 70 kilos more of rubbish every day into this trash can. So we are doing these 15 labs. We are planning for the next 3 months another 15 labs, and we are now starting a talk with more governmental institutions to make 230 labs in the next 3 years. What looks like a lot, but if you think Brazil is a place with 5,000 municipalities, it's less than 10%. but it's a first step. And we are all computer designers and we love Scrum. We develop all these projects as a Scrum project and we develop everything as a computer software, even though it's a public policy. And thank you very much.
All the question and answers, now we show this.
How did we go over so badly? I guess
I think
switching times.
I think it was a lot longer than 20 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just let
Which
it.
was expected.
Okay, so any questions?
Yes.
You know what to do, right? What to dedicate your lives to, because we've got to change. We've got to change the world the way it's working now. We're 15 years into the 21st century, right? But we still don't really know. Remember, the war was 1917, right? Ended. So we really don't know what this century is becoming. What's the shift? What's going on? And I think we're all trying to sense this third way that was mentioned, this kind of coexistence of sharing and creating a city that is actually trying to get back to the original ideas of Rousseau and the social contract, right? But the reason the social contract has been forgotten is because, unfortunately, the market does not regulate itself perfectly. Because the essence for the market to work is that we all have an element of sharing inside of ourselves. And that's not exactly evident in the way the market has been working.
I think we have a question
Should we
over
start
here.
taking some questions? All right, you go first.
Hello, thank you, all four of you, for sharing your interesting stories. Following question is, my ancestors are from Syria, from Damascus, and they live in the suburbs of, not suburbs of, in an area it's called Muhajirin, which is those who came from the outside, and it's also one of the places which ascended the hill of Qasyun, Jabal Qasyun, the mountain of Qasyun. And that area actually became one of the richer and better areas, and even the president, who is now destroying the whole country, has his house there, and which became why it's now one of the safer areas right now in Damascus. So cities evolve and cities change, and Muhajirin change from suburbs to something which is different. And what's your take on this? Do you think that this is somehow stuck, this kind of change, because of things you mentioned that governments are not allowing anymore that kind of change? Is this stuck? Do we have to fight that kind of stuckness? Or is it anyway somehow history is just teaching us that cities can handle with that kind of problems and are going to solve it anyway somehow? The first
Alfredo, do you want to
Sure.
reply?
I know
Pass
that
it along,
area in
panel?
Damascus well. I was there 3 years ago. And so I exactly know that hillside on the outskirts of Damascus, no? So I tell you, cities are changing all the time, right? And so that's a reality we have to all face up to. So you see cranes all over London, all over Berlin, right? Construction constantly going on. The point is that whoever's doing that construction should have an element built into his business plan, whether it be luxury housing, to have at least a 20 to 40% of a kickback or a give back to a more social project, or incorporate in the building a social project. So you have Bloomberg in New York was inviting developers to come to New York City to make housing towers, but he would call it 80, 20, 60, 40. So 20% of the building had to have a social component, or 40% of the building. And in India, for instance, they have been trying unsuccessfully to kind of, you can say, if you do a if you do a luxury apartment block or an office redevelopment project, you can, and you have to remove a slum, or you have to re-urbanize a certain area, that you have to then, you get incentives to resettle and to invest in another area of the city. So it's a kind of quid pro quo. In other words, if you do development here, you must invest in the poorer sectors over here. So, and therefore, we need to tie that knot. We need that coexistence. We need somehow to put ourselves back in the conversation. We need bankers to have to finish their projects, not only get permits from city governors, but actually need the signatures of communities and neighborhoods where their buildings are going to stand. So therefore, I'm not trying to lock development. I just want development to be more rational, because we don't need GDP growth at the rates necessarily that people tell you we do. Why? I'll give you one example. Caracas, Venezuela, where I come from, in the 1950s was the fastest growing economy, one of them in the world. We had $11,000 per capita per year GDP. So therefore, but at the same time that the economy grew, poverty grew. So GDP doesn't just solve everything. So when mayors and governors and everyone tells you we must allow construction in cities, no, that's not true. What we must allow is a kind of equitable development of the city.
I'll add to that one thing, which is incentivization. I think one thing that we're all aware of is if you create the right incentive, then anything can change. And it's just about finding out what that incentive is. So it's really a co-creation challenge. And when you find the right incentive, it's impossible to stop change.
Yeah, talking about incentives, so you say, what do poor people have as an incentive? When they've come to the city, they've squatted the land, they're living in the margins of the city. Well, the land that they sit on is the most valuable thing they own. Their strength, their capacity to work, and the land that they sit on. So they will never allow themselves to be removed from that land, because they don't know when they're going to get a piece of land again. So what you have to do is create an incentive model for them to redevelop on top of that very land, because to move them would break community.
We have another 2 questions coming up.
Yes, thank you. My name is Jessica Berlin. I'm the founder of Construct, founding a innovation hub in Myanmar. My question is for the second 2 speakers. Can you speak a little bit to your experience of coordinating with the governments? Because of course in Rwanda you have a really proactive, pro-development government, but also very, shall we say, controlling, and in Egypt, of course, a very complicated political situation. And how have they reacted to the work you've done, to the communities you've created, and the innovations that have come out of it? Have you tried to integrate with, for example, ministries of education or the relevant line ministries for some of the product innovations you've developed?
You want to go first?
Go for it.
So in the case of Rwanda, I mean, Jesse's very right. The Rwandan government's very involved, and we've actually enjoyed a lot of support from the government, but not direct financial support, because we're actually trying to keep our space independent. And I think that's really important. We have numerous stakeholders in Rwanda that we're serving with the space, and so keeping the space independent from the government, independent from any individual really strong interest, is actually really important, because it makes lots of diverse groups feel welcome in the space. I mean, I think that's one of the things that's very important for a lot of the innovation hubs, and to create a successful innovation hub where you're getting valuable output, is to create a space that's both inclusive and diverse. And so limiting the involvement of the government in the space is a very intentional practice by our space to create more inclusiveness. Yeah.
So maybe also I just want to add to something, that there's 2 ways to become a social activist, right? You first try to have the government comply with its laws, with all the things that it's supposed to do. But if it doesn't comply with it, which is the case in a lot of developing countries, then you have to turn yourself into an activist. Then you have to infiltrate. Then you have to put yourself in a situation where you can somehow activate publicly a new model for the government to respond to. Or get the people behind you and get those signatures so they can get a cable car on their mountain.
I mean, I would just argue, though, that activism takes many forms. And I think simply bringing people together to share ideas, creating space for artists to come together and talk with technologists. I mean, at the end of the day, poor people are the experts in poverty, right? So it's not about it's not about necessarily, being an activist and, spray painting walls and like taking the fight to the streets. I mean, in many cases, it's oftentimes about how do you create space for conversations between, people living in situations where they need access to affordable housing and people in the city who have the mandate to provide that. And then also bringing in architects with experience and things like that. So for us, it's really about creating space for dialogues, interactions, collaborations, and yeah, that's not something you necessarily need to work with the government for. In fact, we want them to be a stakeholder, but an equivalent stakeholder of everyone else in the community.
Nice. Thank you. To answer your question from the Egyptian context, you definitely can't be politically active outright. It's not safe at all. And there's so many other ways of doing it. I mean, one of the things that happens a lot in innovation hubs is culture hacking. And, we have the same objectives at the end of the day, which is to raise the quality of life of those that need to have the quality of life raised. And what we do at ICE Cairo is we work a lot closely with development corporations of other countries because we have the community, and so the government comes to us. And that's why innovation hubs, it's your community that really defines who you are and creates the incentive for people to work with you. Secondly, I'll add to that when you show that you can work on the ground and you can succeed, and you can crack really complex social and environmental challenges in a way that other people haven't been able to, it incentivizes them to use you. So we work now with the Egyptian government to design innovations in the labor market, and we can do it much more effectively and much cheaper than they can. So it makes sense for them. We're incentivizing them to come to us and ask us to work with them. And this is really how we see the future of innovation hubs as spaces that can really co-create, but bring in government, the private sector, civil society, other countries, engineers, designers, experts, architects, to work together to crack these challenges in a completely neutral and safe way.
But I do believe that change is not going to happen in the speed that we need it to happen especially for Africa, because although Latin America is quite urbanized, 80% urbanized, right? 80% of population living in big cities. Africa is going to face that challenge rapidly in the next years. So if we want that change to, and we don't want to repeat all the mistakes of urbanization that China, for instance, is repeating, which will be a huge cost to China of maintenance in the future with all of those high rises and all things. We need to act rapidly and I think with a little more decisiveness.
We're going to take one last question over here.
Hi, thank you very much for your contributions. My name's Andrew Lamb. I'm part of a group called Field Ready, which is about deploying 3D printers and other manufacturing capabilities, make spaces into disaster relief zones to make supplies in the field. My question is about scale. A lot of what you're doing embraces ideas of complexity theory. Serendipity is often a very small thing. Cities are very massive things. And a lot of what you're doing is trying to create what might be described as massive small change. Yeah. But we live in a culture which celebrates scale, where you define success by how big something gets. And actually what you're talking about is a different kind of change, which is at massive amounts of small change. How are you able to articulate that? How are you able to tell those, how do you define success when you're working in quite a different way to the rest of Western culture?
Would you like to direct that to someone in particular?
Anyone, actually.
Okay, before you answer, I'm just going to say that Andrew's going to be speaking about the work that he does in 3D printing for humanitarian relief in the ReHealth track that we have on Thursday. Take it on.
Just like Alfredo said, it will not be quickly renovation of cities and the spaces in the world. But I think if you start to get people to think critically about the medium, no matter what the medium, if it's the city, if it's devices, if it is TV, internet, if they start to think critically about the medium they are working on, they start to think critically about their lives and about the lives they are involved in. And so you get this wave of critical thinking that maybe can change something.
But I'll address that massive scale, because I like scale. We have to go to scale, right? For change, right? So in housing, for instance, when we can figure out the legal loopholes to allow microfinancing for small upgrade of houses, right? because Mohammed Yunus, as you well know, has not gone into cities. It's all in rural, right, and working. But when we can start to elaborate more the idea of cooperative housing, right, to put people in clusters that share credits and microcredits together. When we can go to scale and people in cities allow other people to fly over their houses with right-of-ways, with cable cars to address a hill, but actually there's a lot of private property below that doesn't allow that. Right? Or why does the United States not have a high-speed train going from New York to Washington, D.C., for instance? Because a high-speed train would require new eminent domain tracks. They would have to lay down new perfect set tracks that need to be a straight line that would cut through a lot of private property. So the real problem is that we're caught in a super legalistic society that needs to have more flexible mechanisms for negotiation.
Could I just also, Andrew, I want to thank you for framing the points in the way that you have. Massive, small scale change. I mean, I think if we keep doing the same things, we should expect the same results. Ultimately, I think what we're doing here is trying to rethink how we want society to look like in the future. And really, if we have one policy that applies to a homogenous group of people in a homogenous city across the world, then we should expect it to fail. We need to take into consideration the realities of the different communities in those cities, the different identities. But the spaces that we're talking about here, the innovation hubs that in the park, and these community spaces that we're talking about, are really about accelerating the rate at which people come into contact with new identities and new people. And creating that space, it's basically, we were talking about this the other day as a part of the Global Innovation Gathering, but how can we reframe these innovation hubs and think about them in the same way we think about museums, for example. Museums are known to have social value because there's sort of educational content there. How do we create this sort of mandate to establish these innovation hubs in multiple contexts to create opportunities for multiple different types of people to have diverse conversations and allow for the outcomes of that to happen?
Thank you very much, Jon. I think that is the perfect closing for this panel. I'd like to thank all four of you for the really interesting insights into all of your work. And if you want to meet up and ask more questions to these four fantastic gentlemen, then come and meet us at the Gig Makerspace and Hub that we have set out in the main hall for you. Big round of applause, everybody, please.